Welcome to the Write to Ignite podcast, where we talk to authors who are writing to ignite the next generation with a heart for the Lord. I am Kyle Morgan.
And I'm Brenda Covert.
Now, Brenda, I have a question for you. What sport did you play when you were growing up?
Did a little bit of softball. Uh, Loved track for a while there until people got faster than me, and then it wasn't as much fun. A little bit of volleyball. I did like volleyball.
Nice. Well, today we are talking to the author of a sports young adult novel. As an elementary teacher of over 25 years, Lori Z. Scott carries her love of children from the classroom into her writing. Inspired by local and nationwide events endangering kids of all ages, Lori wrote Offsides, which won the Christy Award for Young Adult Fiction in 2024. Prior to this milestone, Lori penned a 10-title, best-selling early chapter book series, contributed to more than a dozen books, and published upward of 200 short stories, articles, essays, poems, and devotions from magazines like Focus on the Family and Brio. When she's not writing, Lori loves to draw, wear fuzzy socks, play board games, go to church, and tell lame jokes. Welcome to the podcast, Lori.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I want to start off by asking, what is your favorite lame joke?
Oh, goodness. They're almost all spontaneous, so I don't even know if I could answer that, and it is unfair. But as a school teacher, I love it when kids come up to ask me a joke because I can almost always figure out the answer. And they're like, oh, you've heard that before. And I'll be like, nope, I really haven't. It's just that I was raised in a family where our fluency was in puns, and we just told lame jokes all the time.
I love it.
So if someone groans, I feel like, that's applause for me.
That's better than a laugh. So you've written two sports young adult books, Offsides and Inside the 10-Foot Line. And I wanted to ask, is this part of a series or are they standalone books?
Yes to both.
Okay.
I originally envisioned this as a series, but a series where each individual book could stand on its own. I don't know if you want me to elaborate on that. I've done so many different sports. Like I played volleyball at Wheaton College grad, and I played a year of softball there. And I've also played basketball, was a swimmer, did track, all growing up during the time period where women were just coming into women's sports. We were just coming into our own. We didn't have club teams, so you could do all the sports, and it was a lot of fun. I will say I'm not much of a gymnast. I don't think I could touch my toes. I had a sister who was a cheerleader and a gymnast, and another sister who was a nationally ranked swimmer, who was a nationally ranked swimmer.
Wow.
She had a full ride scholarship at Purdue University, and she won like woman athlete of the decade or whatever it was. She's just outstanding. So we just grew up in a family that loved sports, but it also wasn't everything to us. Like we loved jokes, we loved theater, I mean, I am so nerdy that you wouldn't even believe it. You get this, you're a jock or you're a nerd. No, I was both. So I have outlines for several books in the series, but you know how the market is. Even though the book has won the Christy Award, which is a big deal, it's still a hard sale because people think because they're not a soccer player that they can't read the book. Well, the fact of the matter is, I am not a wizard, and I've read Harry Potter. You know, I've never traveled through a magical wardrobe, but I've read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I certainly have never solved a crime, but I've read mystery and things like that. So, yeah, I just want to kind of put that out there. This is sort of like the Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Yeah, it's a heavy topic, but there's humor in there. And I have totally now forgotten what your question was, but hopefully somewhere in the midst of all that, blah, I answered it.
You did.
For readers who haven't read the books, you said they could be a series or standalone. Does that mean there is a different main character
Yes,
in
indeed.
each book?
Different main character in each one.
Okay. Do these main characters appear in both books?
They do not. They do not. I have seen series where that happens, but honestly, I really wanted it to be so that they could be read by people who enjoyed sports like I did. Well, even if they didn't, that they would still enjoy it. But also that they wouldn't necessarily have to have the previous book to enjoy the current book or to know what was going on. So,
So kind of same story
Okay.
world, but different.
yes,
I like that. So you said, it tackles, a heavy subject matter. So it tackles the subject of human trafficking. Is that right?
it does. It
So,
does.
so what brought you to that subject?
Well, I was brought to that subject kicking and screaming because um, I it wasn't something I wanted to write about. I like happy and playful. That's me. But somehow both of these books, like the Inside the 10-Foot Line, dealt with eating disorders and body image. Um, and this one, actually, my critique group had told me when I brought my outline to my publisher, and my publisher said, "Oh, well, we already have a book kind of waiting to be published that has a very, very similar plot. So could you give us a different plot?" And I took it to my critique group. I'm like, "Well, what do you guys think?" And one of the girls in my group, her name's Gail, and she is active in her church. And one of the things that the church does is they help police track people who might be um, victims of human trafficking. And she said immediately, you should cover human trafficking because at this age group, young adult age group, a lot of your readers are going to be vulnerable to that type of thing. And I looked at her and I said, "No, thanks. Don't want to do it." But then she said, "Well, just go back and pray about it." And so I did. And over the course of about 2 weeks, I just got bombarded with stories. There was a child of a professor where I used to live whose daughter was taken. She was trafficked. She was recovered. Um, then just recently, I live in the Dallas Fort Worth area. There was a young girl who was taken from a Mavericks game, and she was likewise trafficked and found. And it just kept coming up, and I'd be watching ads, and they'd come up. And finally, I was like, "Okay, God, I'm going to write the story." And I did. And it was one of the hardest things I could do to research. Like, how do you find that balance where you're doing a very heavy topic with a young adult audience, but you don't want to traumatize anybody and you don't want to go into great detail about what's going on? And I think when you read the book, you'll see it's sort of like those where you can hear a sound and you know that there's someone in the next room, but you don't have to see who that person is. I think I kind of set it up that way so that I could broach the topic without triggering someone who might be reading it. It's a really important topic. It's huge. The research was hard and heartbreaking. I watched that movie that came out, Freedom. I forget what it's called. Do you remember what it's called?
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. And this was after I had the manuscript ready, and I was just like, this is it. And the thing is, because it's such a difficult topic, people don't like to think about it. I didn't like to think about it. And so my hope is that the book would bring awareness. My original goal was that I would earn enough royalties that I would be able to donate those proceeds to a shelter or a place where they help women recover from this type of thing. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm still hopeful that that could be the case because there are some great organizations out there that do help women that are going through it. And I think our women, children, even boys and girls, that awareness is something, and what to do about it needs to be on their radar. And I presented it in a format that's safer because it's fiction. And ironically, yes, still has humor in it.
That was going to be my next question.
I
Were you able
know.
to weave humor into such a heavy topic?
Well, here's the thing about humor. I most of my bread and butter has been in writing humor. Like my life dream was to be a cartoonist. Um, because I just love
Oh,
that.
you couldn't tell from your Instagram pages.
Yeah, right. Lately, I haven't been able to post anything about books. It's all been drawings. Um, but the thing about humor is when you can mix humor into the story, first of all, you give the reader a chance to breathe and digest and puts a little
Yes.
bit of space between whatever that is and what they're going through. But also, it makes the hard truths hit even harder because you have that brevity and then it's bam, it's right there. So I use humor in it as an aspect of the personality of the main character. Some of the snarky ways that she kind of looks at things, not in a snarky way, like in one of the scenes, she's an introvert, her best friend's an extrovert, and her extroverted friend is trying to push her into being more social and doing things outside her comfort zone. And she's at a meeting at a table with all these extroverted bling bling girls, and they ask her, "What would you like to have at the prom?" or whatever dance it was. I don't even remember. It might have just been a dance. And she's thinking, well, what do I say? I'd like to have a zip line. Could we have elephant rides from the parking lot? This is just not going to fly with this audience. So it's just a mix. It's mixed into it, but when it needs to be serious, it very much is.
And it's not humor that is attached to the serious subject. It's
Oh, no, no.
offside.
I see what you did there. Very good.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't want to make this somehow a parody or a satire of, the subject matter. You're just using it as, coping mechanisms. There's quite a few people in my life that in the most, horrific times, they will crack jokes just to break the tension, just as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, because what they say is you got to laugh to keep from crying.
Yeah. So you kind of already answered the question of how you researched this, but I'm sure you found that there's quite a few groups that have kind of leaned into some more, conspiracy theories or some things that, maybe have taken a real serious problem, but then taken it to an extreme level where it's like, well, that's not true. There's there's some of that. How did you run into finding accurate information while also, making sure that you didn't fall into some crazy conspiracy rabbit holes, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. Remember, this is not a documentary, it's a piece of fiction.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of mystery involved in it. But some of my research was just going to sources like the local shelters and talking to people there about their programs, looking at documentaries, reading articles, real articles about abductions or kidnappings, I guess maybe would be a better term. And I mean, obviously, I'm going to use the internet for it. I didn't use any artificial intelligence to help me, though. Nope, none of that. I did the digging myself. I didn't was not satisfied with what came up, and viewed what I could of movies. Like I don't even like watching horror movies, so just like okay, I'm peeking, seeing what's out there, and then trying to knowing how sensitive I was to these kinds of uncomfortable feelings about this very evil thing. Think about if I were this age, how would I want someone to tell me about it without freaking me out because it's so terrifying in its truth. Not to mention in the area I live, when you do a search on the sexual predator thing, I'm surrounded by red dots all around within a 5 mile radius, hundreds of little dots. So,
Wow.
yep.
I'm aware of one down the end of my block.
Yep, we have a couple in our neighborhood.
Did any character in Offside surprise you, like maybe grow beyond what you originally planned?
They all do. Uh, I'm sort of a mix between a planner and a plotter. I don't make a full high detailed outline, but I do have an outline of where I think the story is going to go. And then I sort of grow it chapter by chapter. And as I was going through that, um, the story took an unexpected twist, one that I myself did not see coming. And it surprised everyone, even though subconsciously somehow I had planted all these things that would make total sense as to why what happened happened. I think that's sort of the miraculous way that God works through writers is sometimes we're writing things and we don't even see the plan. That's kind of how life is too, you know. We
That's
go
true.
through life and this happens and we don't know where it's going and we think all is lost and then all of a sudden we're like, now I know what God was up to in the first place. Oh my goodness, I didn't know. Um, but I really liked the main character. I had so many readers come to me and say, I'm Danny. So Danny is the main character. She's named after my good friend Marianne Herring's daughter, who played soccer, called Danny. And even though it's not based on her at all, I just borrowed the name. But she's introverted and she feels awkward and uncomfortable in many social situations. But when her best friend quits the soccer team, all of a sudden she's cruised through most of her high school with this best friend. I mean, most introverts just need that one good friend by their side, right? And then they're okay to go into different situations. But when you take that friend out, all of a sudden it's like the rug's been pulled out from under you. And so exploring this character and going through different things, I'm going to try to not get teary-eyed here, but like there's one point in there where Danny is in the lunchroom and her friend is not there with her and it's high school and it's awkward and she decides it's just easier for her to go in the bathroom and hide in a stall and eat her lunch there or maybe go to the car and eat her lunch in the car. And I had friends come up to me and say, that was me. How did you know? How did you know that I was hiding in the bathroom? Because I was too scared. So I had a lot of people that really connected with Danny. And I'm sorry that makes me get weepy, but to know that I can, as a writer, really speak to someone and their emotions and to let them know you're not alone. And that's the thing that Danny has to realize that she's not alone. And she was surrounded by people who loved her. And she, because of her introvertedness, was not even aware of that kind of cushion that she had. So that character just really resonated with a lot of people.
That's great. My next question was going to say, what is the feedback you've heard from young adults? Well, you just answered that.
Yeah, Danny was really the highlight for a lot of them. They love Soul, the other character, and whenever I write my books, I always borrow names because I'm a school teacher and I have so many kids with such great names. I'm like, I'll see them in the hall and I'll be like, hey, is it okay if I use your name for this book? Like there's a girl named Lorelai. I fell in love. Some people think, well, you named her Lorelai because your name's Lori. No, because I had a student named Lorelai and I loved her name and I used it as my main character in the volleyball book. But no, it just honestly, having a story where people are like, this meant a lot to me. Like this was my favorite thing. Not only is that shocking to me that God would possibly use anything I write in any by any means, I'm not your typical writer. But it's just kind of fun to explore those types of characters as well.
Yeah, I had a classmate in community college. His first name was Fox. I was like,
Oh, I love
oh,
it.
I'm using that at some point.
Yeah, I'm saving. I've got a my uke. I am saving that name. No one better steal it.
There
I
we
just
go.
love that name, and I keep telling that kid, I'm like, I'm going to use your name in a story someday.
I used to work in an office and I kept a 3x5 card by my typewriter. And every time we came across a crazy name, I wrote it down. It's like, this is awesome. I need
Yes,
to look for that 3x5 card.
yes, they're great. I'm not very good at coming up with names, but I love it, and they don't resemble the real person at all, at
Yeah.
all.
Of course.
Yeah, my very pale white Viking-like cousin. I borrowed his name for a book, and he was a African American basketball player, which yeah, wasn't what he is in real life.
So you did not expect to write such a heavy story. You wanted to just write the funny stuff, but this is the one that won the big award, the Christy Award. This is
Yes.
so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Like how how does that work? Does the publisher submit your book to be considered? Do you submit it to be considered? How does that work?
Well, I don't submit my book. The Christie Award has to be, your book has to be nominated by someone else. I believe
Okay.
that is the publisher. And I did not even realize that I was up for it. I almost didn't go to the award ceremony. Here's the thing, though. I'm sitting there at this table surrounded by these authors, all of whom I've got their books next to my nightstand because I'm like fangirling on all of them, like, oh, your book is a great thing. Oh, and I'm sitting there with my mom in the audience because I love my parents. They're just the best. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna be cheering for whoever gets this award because this is just really awesome. Just feeling a little bit like a fish out of water. And people go up on the stage for this award. I did not realize how big it was. And they have prepared speeches. It's like the Oscars, and they have this whole line thing. And I'm like, well, I don't have to worry about that. That's not gonna be a problem for me. Because sci-fi fantasy for the past, I don't know if you look at the awards forever, has always won this category. Because unlike the adult categories where all those different genres are separated, young adult is all lumped together and almost always sci-fi fiction wins. So I wasn't even worried about it. And I literally got up on stage and I'm like, well, I have nothing prepared. But I mean, I did thank my publisher and God and my parents, and I think that was all good. But yeah. And then they take a series of people go through and read the book, evaluate it. They get ranked. They do get hundreds and hundreds of entries. So it's an honor just to be nominated. And whatever scoring thing they did, somehow I came out on top. Shows that God has a sense of humor too, I guess.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, but literally I was the only one that didn't have a speech prepared.
Well, that's cool. So, getting away from that topic to a more general topic, how can authors make their stories stand out in today's crowded market?
That is really hard because it is a very crowded market. Now, there's a difference between writing really well and marketing really well to make your book stand out, right? I've read a lot of standout books that came from very small authors, and I've read a lot of big title books that were not as well written, but they got a lot going around. I think my process is to simply not think about, do I want a story that stands out? But the why behind why I'm writing. And the why behind why I write is because it's obedience. And I know that sounds trite to say that I write to be obedient because of course you want your book to do well. And of course you want your book to be out there. And of course you want your book to make an impact. But there's lots of different reasons for writing. Maybe the book that you write is just for you. And that's okay because the thing about writing is we can lose ourselves in it, but we can also find ourselves in it. Just like in a
Mhm.
book, you can lose yourself in a book and find yourself in a book. And writing is the same way. So whether or not you get the contract, whether or not you get the sales, whether or not you get the award, the important thing is that God gave you a story, and in obedience, you wrote it. Now, you can make that story better. I think there's a couple of things that are really important. One is to be involved in a critique group, and I have a great critique group, and they're all published authors. Many of them are award winners, and they give fabulous feedback. You need to be in a critique group where you feel comfortable sharing what you have. So I have a group that's a Christian filled. I've been in other reading groups where it's not, and sometimes you can be dismissed in those groups. Um, so not always, but sometimes. Usually writers are pretty supportive, but it's a little bit different of an atmosphere in a Christian writing group. Second thing is to read a lot. Read, 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 read. Because as a teacher, we call those mentor texts. And those texts can help you know how to structure a sentence, know how to break the rules. Before I wrote Offsides or Inside the 10-Foot Line, I got a stack of books, sports books, and read as many as I could find. And it was really interesting for me to do that because what I learned in that reading was that the story wasn't so much about the sport as it was about the human aspect of that and the character growth. And that really helped me when I approached this myself to make sure I'm not like, oh, I'm just telling a sports story. How boring would that be? It would be very boring. But this is about, the challenges that this character's facing or the problems they're facing or anything like that, or even the bigger issues like human trafficking. So read a lot and read in your genre. And then just make sure that you write, but don't be too hard on yourself. I mean, you make a standout story in the revision process. The revising is where the story really comes to life and when you can really polish those characters. Beta readers are also helpful. I'm probably not telling you something that you haven't heard a million times from other people, but it's really true. Having people read your story and to get honest feedback. Like on Inside the 10-Foot Line, the first time I sent that out to someone, expected to get, great reviews. And they said, we liked your antagonist better than the protagonist. Oh. Because the antagonist was dealing with some heavy issues, and it's that they're going through this trauma, and the protagonist was too squeaky clean. So, character work is really, really important. You have to connect with your reader. So, I had to do a whole rewrite on the main character in the first book of that series, but. Also, I would say going to writing conferences is great. That's one of the great things about Write to Ignite is they often offer master classes from leaders in the industry, and you get so much information from them. And sometimes you even get opportunities from conferences. You could submit things to editors. You can get critiques on your stories. You can find critique groups. That's always really important. So I hope that helps. It's not like this is the magic formula to making your book stand out. You got to do the work. And I think a lot of success, anyway, from my experience, is, God has made it so.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust you if you said you had a magic formula to write a book.
If I did, I would be a lot richer than I am.
I like what you said that there's a difference between a well-written book and a well-marketed book. I feel like that applies to not just books, but movies, TV shows, art, anything creatively, there's a big difference between what wins awards, what's viewed by, the majority of people, and even just social media that way too. I mean, there's some people
Absolutely.
that are making, good quality stuff. So you were talking about your philosophy towards writing. So, how has your philosophy towards writing changed over the years?
Hmm. Interesting question. Like I said, I'm not your typical writer, so I didn't grow up filling notebooks full of writing and things like that. I've always liked to write. Um, but I do it because I like challenges. I like the way my mind can play with words. I like where I can go. I like to amuse myself that way. Um, well, like I said, originally, I think I just mostly wrote for me just
Yeah.
because it's fun, or I like the challenge. And it really started changing when my daughter was very young and wasn't working, wasn't teaching. So I go to the library and they have a flyer for science fiction writing contest. And I was like, sounds better than changing diapers. So I wrote a story and something really amazing happened. Like I sat down at that computer and I felt like I got up like 10 seconds later and it had been like 5 hours. And I don't know what happened. There's something very magical about words and magical about how things work. I did this the other day. I sat down on the couch. I was just going to draw a quick sketch while I was on the phone, and then the phone conversation ended. And I'm like, I'm just going to finish that picture. I started at 1:30. At 5:30, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Now I really like the picture, but I don't know what happened to those 4 hours. I honestly can't tell you. Then I started writing devotions. That was really my bread and butter, just writing a bunch of devotions and sending them in. That's a great way to start to get into writing, by the way, is to write short pieces for magazines and devotionals. Really helps you to get to be able to write to a word count, to write on topic, to write cleanly. And it just kind of built from there. And I think my biggest change came recently after hearing a sermon by David Jeremiah, who's one of my favorite people. And I actually tried to write it down as fast as I could on my phone. And what he said is, there's nothing in the Bible that says we shouldn't plan, but we need to follow God instead of asking him to follow us. Because what I was doing is I was like, I'm going to write this story. Here's my story, blah, 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 blah. Lord, please help me with this story. Lord, please come alongside me as I write this story. But he says, don't exclude God from the process. And I thought, well, I haven't been excluding him from the process. I'm asking him to bless it and use my words. Instead, he says, go to God. It's not how it works. Go to God and say, God, may I please come alongside you? What would you have me write? And I realized that's what I had done with Offsides, not knowing it, because he had said, this is what you should write. And I said, no, 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 no. And then when I finally came alongside him and wrote that story, well, that's where it is.
The rest is
So
history.
yeah. So that's my approach has changed. So now before I write, I mean, and I know a lot of people do this, you pray before writing, but I'm like changing the way that I'm praying instead of come bless me in what I'm doing. What are you wanting me to do? Help me bless others with that.
I've been in the same position because if we're being honest, it's less of, come bless me. It's like I'm going to write this whether you
Yes,
bless me or not, but it'd be really nice if you'd bless.
that's exactly it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because we're still seeking God's guidance. I don't want anyone to feel bad. I'm just saying for me personally, it was really an eye opener. And so let me tell you a little bit more of that story. So a year ago, going to the Right to Publish conference in Illinois. It's a Christian conference. I love it because it's near where I live. And so I get to see my mom and dad, who I mentioned before, who are the love of my life. And I almost cry thinking about it. But we go to sit at the table, and I had all sorts of books to pitch. I mean, I am not at a loss for book ideas to pitch. I've got dozens of book ideas to pitch. But I sat down at the table with him. I said, okay, we are going to pray and we're going to seek God and we're going to write a story. In the fall of 2027, the first two books from that series that I pitched are going to be released through Penguin Random House, their Christian division, and they contracted for 6 books. That story idea was not mine. I can't share too much about it because it's going to be a while before it's out. But it was just praying and seeking, and that idea came, and I just like, that's it. That's it. This is the story. This is what's going to sell. And by golly, it did. And I'm hoping that, you guys will remember that in 2027 and look me up. It's a picture book, which is my absolute bucket list to have a picture book out there.
Will
And
you
so
be illustrating it? You have done so many illustrations on Instagram, which I
I
am going to keep pitching Instagram. Everybody follow Lori Z. Scott on Instagram. She's awesome.
It's actually Stories by Lori now because my original account got hacked and I had to start over. So
Oh, yeah.
I know. Scammers, they drive me crazy. We don't have the illustrator yet, so we will see. That is in God's hand. He knows my desires, but also I need to be aware of what his are. So we'll see who that ends up being.
Well, maybe I'll write something and have you illustrate it. We will get those pictures out.
Out there.
Yeah, that's important for all of us to remember because it's just so easy to get up in the morning and start barreling through the day with our own under our own power, I said my prayer, Lord, and here I go. And I've got all this stuff to do. And you're just like hoping God is back there at the end of the kite while you're rushing along with it. And it's the wrong way to look at it.
But that's me. That's 100% me. And that's why I said I don't want people to beat themselves up for that. I think there's a lot of us in that situation.
Yes,
But just
yes.
to be aware of it and then maybe try to be a little bit more intentional about it. And then it also takes away, believe it or not, a lot of stress. It's like, well, I'm doing what I can, and it may be not what Brenda's doing, may not be as much as Kyle is doing, but I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to compare my journey to someone else's, unless it's just to say, hey, they made it. Maybe I can too.
As a teacher and you have summers off, do you do most of your writing in the summer or do you carve out time throughout the year?
Most of my writing is done in the summer. I I try to get like Offsides was basically written during those summer months that I had off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
About 70,000 words. So it was a lot of writing. I had to be very, very focused, but totally worth it. During
Definitely.
the school year, I will write a few things. Like I try to write for a couple of blogs out there, not my own because I'm too disorganized to run my own, but for other people, I'll do some blogging. Um, and some short stories like for Brio. During the year, I did a couple of short stories for Brio magazine, and those are simple. You can snap those out. They're short.
So with offsides, young adults are gonna read the book. They're gonna be aware of human trafficking and stuff. So is there a piece of advice that you would give to young people on how to avoid situations, how to be on the lookout, just just things that they may not think are putting themselves in danger?
Yes, I think, and there are some resources that are listed in the back of the book. There's signs you can look out for um, predators. There's a hotline that you can call. I think it always starts with you can pray for yourself, but also for parents to pray for their kids, to turn away the eyes of predators, to be surrounded by God's grace. I don't think that's a bad thing to ask for every single day. But also, watch out for online scammers, for people that try to get information from you, especially with social media out there. It's so easy for someone to pretend to be someone they're not. Again, this is how my original Instagram account got hacked, as someone pretending to be my editor. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, yeah, she was hacked first, and then they turned around and
Oh,
used her account to hack mine.
Wow.
oh
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So being aware of those types of things, educating yourself on what to do should something happen, um, some defensive moves that you could make, which again, those some of those things are listed in the back of the book. Being aware of your surroundings at all times and not putting yourself in situations where you could potentially be in danger.
I like that. Sorry to bring the conversation down again. That was just my last my
No,
last
it's
question.
okay. I mean, I'm not by any means an expert on that, and heaven knows I've put myself in danger a number of times doing very stupid things like, oh, well, I realize it's getting dark, but I'm in a strange city, but I need a charger for my battery. So why don't I just walk those 3 blocks down to the drugstore to get it? Yeah, I have done stupid things like that before, but or going running early in the morning by myself in a large city, and just some situations where you can just almost like you can almost palpably feel that there is a danger here and I need to flee or I need to get out of here.
Well, Brent, did you have another question?
Well, I tell you, I had 18.
18 questions? I'm ready.
No, I had 18, but a lot of them ended up getting covered. So. But it's what we always hope for, that we don't have to pull the information out of you, that you are just going to willingly offer it up, and you've pretty much done that. It makes our job easier.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. So you've conquered young adult. You won the Christy Award. You've done middle grades, so the next is picture books.
Yes.
That's exciting.
That's so exciting.
I am very excited about this, and I'm very excited about the project idea.
Your philosophy
I,
reminds me of the filmmakers, the Kendrick brothers. They said that they learned that there is a difference between a good idea and a God idea. And it sounds like that's the lesson that you've learned too.
yes, but even so, it's I always have to keep myself in check because it is very easy to go off on little bunny trails and try to do things that maybe is not the right time. And try you don't want to force those kinds of situations. Like God will do what he's going to do when it's time for him to do it. And we don't need to rush him. We just need to practice patience, which is one of those life skills that is sorely lacking in me. But never pray for patience, by the way. It's just, especially if you're a
Never,
school teacher, it just,
never.
you're like, Lord, forgive me for asking for patience. I don't want patience. Just please give me sanity. I'll take that any day. And I don't know. I mean, your podcast is fairly new, and I know in the questions that you sent out, you had asked about our testimony, and um, I had to have to tell you that of all the questions you asked, that was probably the most difficult one for me to answer
Oh, wow.
because it's just like me with swimming. We grew up with a swimming pool. I don't remember learning how to swim. I just always could. And it's almost the same thing. Like I can't remember a time when I didn't have Jesus. It's just he he is just always there, like in my family, in all the interactions we have and in all that we do. And I don't always pay attention to that. I sometimes fail in my walk, stumble in my walk, but there's some really hard lessons. I don't want you to think that my life has been easy. It hasn't. I deal with a chronic illness. I've gone through a divorce. We've had some deaths in the family. There's been challenges, but through all that, I've just there's three things that stand out, and if you can hold on to those three things, um, then I think that you'll do just fine. And one is to know that God loves you. That's just plain and simple. God loves you, and he's faithful. I think great is thy faithfulness is my favorite hymn. God is faithful. You may not realize what's going on, but he's faithful. And he's going to be enough when everything else is stripped away from you, when you have seen the worst of humanity, or when you're struggling with things that you don't think you can handle. He is enough. And I don't have more to say than just that. I did say to you guys, though, it's a simple Jesus loves me, this I know, with a yes. And then over 60 years of trying to discover how deep that love goes. And I still haven't found the bottom.
So, yeah, I think you and I are a lot alike, Lori. We've
Yeah.
experienced a lot of the same things.
Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just told my parents the other day, I'm like, if I was to write about non-believers, I would have to write about 4-year-olds because that's all I know. That's that's pretty much, that's I'd have to go back that far, really, and it's
That is
difficult.
amazing. Yeah, I got saved when I was 4, and I
Yeah.
remember where I was, and I asked Mom about heaven, but I waited until she left the bedroom before I prayed and asked Jesus into my heart. And it never occurred to me to tell my parents that I got saved. For me, it was, yay, now I'm not going to hell. When Jesus comes back, I'm going with my family, and it was just like, it's settled. That's
I think a lot of times, like I don't just write for the Christian market. I try to write for the general market sometimes as well. And I think our faith is going to come out. It's going to come out no matter what we do, just in the words that we say and how
Yeah.
we say it and how we deliver it, and the message of hope that's always kind of embedded in a lot of things that Christians write, even in the darkest mystery novels and things like that. There's always that element of hope.
Yeah.
That's vital. It's vital to have hope.
I love that. Well, Lori was gracious enough to offer a giveaway. You can win a copy of Offsides, and here's how you enter. Send us an email to info.righttoignite@gmail.com. That's info.righttoignite@gmail.com. Or you can comment on this blog post on our website at righttoignite.com, and you could be the winner. Lori, thank you so much for doing this.
It was my honor. Thanks so much.